What if your childhood fears became real? And what if escaping them was just the beginning? Welcome to Little Nightmares. I'll be covering the events of Little Nightmares 1 and 2, as well as the secrets of the Maw. And then we'll be covering info that's been released around Little Nightmares 3. So, spoilers ahead. And if you want to just hear about what will come for Little Nightmares 3, please skip to the time shown here. To begin the story, let's start with Little Nightmares 1. Say hello to the Maw. This massive vessel is what you'll travel through for the entirety of Little Nightmares 1. It is grotesque, oppressive, and completely unforgiving. You play as Six, a small child that, for comparison, is about the size of a seagull. Or a bottle of wine. As you progress, you encounter 4 sets of enemies. The janitor, a tall man with a skinny body and stubby legs, with abnormally long arms. With the only thing keeping you safe is the fact that he's blind. The chef, a large humanoid with a sagging mask over his face, giving him poor perception, making him pretty easy to deal with. Next, the banquet, a feast held with tables full of gluttonous humanoids, with even less perception than the chef. But they're hungry and will crawl after anything put in front of them. Lastly, the lady, an elegant, slim woman with supernatural powers and a gorgeous mask hiding her face. As for the storyline, you wake in a dark corner, alone, and left in a yellow raincoat. As you begin down the only path available, where you get the only thing that will help you along the way, a lighter. That's it. That's all you get. And you must continue on away from your safety of knowing and into the lair. You meet the janitor in the lair, where he is seen taking care of other children, capturing them, wrapping them up, and sending them further into the maw. And as you continue, you repeatedly run into him until he corners you in an elevator, where he repeatedly reaches after you underneath the closing door until you finally pull apart the cage keeping the door open, in which it slams down, ripping his arms off, which still seemingly reach out after you even after they've gone torn off. Clearly, you can't go back, so there's only one way left, forwards, into the kitchen, where you run into the chef, who's working on preparing food constantly. You can easily slip by unnoticed, yet you need a key. So you go to their living space, where you find the chef sleeping. But wasn't he just in the kitchen? As you slip past him and unhook the key, he wakes and turns on the light, to which you see a picture on the wall showing the chef, but his face is different on each half. There are 2 of them. The twins. You must take the key, go back down into the kitchen, and continue on. However, now you have to face both the twins at once. You sneak past, getting into the dishwashing area, in which you activate the production line to carry yourself out of the kitchen, leaving the twins reaching out after you in desperation. Finally, for the first time, you leave the maw. However, hope is short-lived. You are in an open sea with nothing close except for a passenger boat, carrying dozens of other humanoids that are similar in size to the twins, which then you must go back into the maw, knowing what you must face next. You have now reached the banquet, a massive feast featuring tables full of gluttonous humanoids, and the only thing that keeps them from devouring you as well is their complete focus on their food, and their sluggish nature from their gluttony. Yet don't get comfortable. They are hungry, and they want you. After evading a horde of humanoids chasing after you, you finally reach the lady. You must sneak past her initially to get a key. However, she vanishes after you break a suspicious vase to get the key. You must then go through her unsettling room, to which you finally reach a mirror. And for those who have already played before, this mirror has already been looted for ahead of time. And when you go back to the large room, you make her face, herself, to which after reflecting the light upon her several times, she falls to the ground. The one thing I didn't bring up before is that these creatures aren't your only struggle. You are hungry. And not just a normal, I need food. It's a sudden and growing thirst. First, you're given bread by another child. Then you eat bait, which ends up getting you caught by the janitor the first time. But then it goes downhill fast. You find a caught rat and eat it. And lastly, you meet a gnome. one of the friendly creatures that you see along your journey, and it's holding out a sausage for you to eat. But it's not the sausage you want. Instead, you eat him. Now, back to the lady. As she lays in front of you, you have every chance to leave and avoid her, but you move closer and closer and sink your teeth into her. Not just devouring her, but her powers as well. Finally, you walk back through the banquet, and you are done. Every single humanoid you pass falls behind you, being absorbed by your newfound powers. As you head towards the door, you walk into the light, leaving the maw now filled with death behind. Now begins Secrets of the Maw, which stays very true to its name because while Six is climbing upwards, another story is unfolding in the shadows below. Here, you play as the runaway kid, another child trapped in the maw. While their storyline is more puzzle-based than the original story, you do face several enemies throughout the chapter. Here you pass through 3 main areas. Now, after you escape the janitor's lair, you fall into the depth, a completely deeper section of the maw, surrounded by dark waters, hiding something far worse than drowning. You meet the granny. Now, the name may sound sweet. She is anything but. She is a grotesque, submerged figure with stringy hair and gnarly limbs. She is relentless, pulling at the debris you balance on, waiting for a single splash to drag you down. Every jump, every swim becomes a fight against the unseen terror just below the surface. Now, after you electrocute the granny by dropping a TV into her waters, you finally leave the depths and enter the hideaway. Down here, it shifts from the focus of stalking predators to machinery that powers the maw itself. Here you meet the gnomes. This time, they're not just background creatures, but essential allies. They're still shy, scurrying, and easily startled creatures, but after a little comforting, they help you with small tasks and operating the furnace. Now, while most of this section requires working with the gnomes and solving oh my gosh, and solving puzzles, there are still enemies hiding in the dark. Here, you continue your encounters with the janitor, evading him while in complete darkness. But after powering on the furnace, you escape and reach your final destination, the residence, the lady's own domain. Here, the atmosphere shifts to pure dread. In her residence, you're pursued by shadow children, twisted figures that swarm in the dark and dissolve in the light, almost as a representation of the deaths of the other children within the maw. However, as you escape from them, you run into the lady who captures you. But she doesn't kill you. Instead, she turns you into a gnome. This is where the 2 stories collide. That moment in the game where Six ignores the sausage and consumes the helpless gnome, that wasn't just any creature. It was the runaway kid. Secrets of the Maw doesn't just add chapters. It reframes the picture of Little Nightmares and how the only way to survive requires someone else to fall. And here's where Little Nightmares 1's story ends, with the runaway kid's death and Six's final escape. Now, 4 years later after Little Nightmares' release, Little Nightmares 2 came out. In Little Nightmares 2, you play as Mono, a small boy wearing a paper bag over his head. And similar to the storyline in the first game, he is small in a world made for creatures much bigger than him. Just like the first game, you face many creatures in the world. Here, you meet the Hunter, a man wrapped in rags, scouring the woods with a shotgun and setting traps for you to fall in. The Teacher, a seemingly normal woman. However, when she finds you, her neck stretches, reaching after you with unsettling speed. The Doctor, a massive man found within a hospital, but somehow able to crawl across the ceiling, tending to the patients. Lastly, the Thin Man, a haunting figure with no face and an elegant suit that comes from the television that seems to hypnotize Mono. Now, in Little Nightmares 2, you wake in the forest with nothing except for TVs and traps. Now, as you continue through the forest, avoiding traps, you reach a house. and head into the basement where another child is being held. After freeing them, they run past you in fear until you team up with them to escape the hunter. Finally, cornered, you pull a shotgun off its hook and point it at the door and fire. Now, while we don't see the hunter get shot, with the silence, we can assume that the hunter is dealt with. You leave the forest and cross a large body of water across the broken doorframe. Welcome to the Pale City, a crumbling nightmare. And as a student studying architecture, it's painful to see. Like, I don't even want to know who designed it, because they either did some crazy magical stuff or are going to get sued. Now, as you pass through the crumbling city, you reach a school that appears to be unsettlingly empty. That is until you hear the laughs. Laughs of porcelain children that kidnap the other child you're with. Now, you must continue alone again and hide from the teacher, as well as fight against these porcelain children until you can free the other child from the porcelain children, keeping them captive. After escaping, you find a yellow coat. And here is where the two stories from Little Nightmares 1 and Little Nightmares 2 collide, because you realize who you're with. You're with Six, the protagonist from the first game. But you quickly move on and reach a hospital that, like everything else, is a crumbling nightmare. But rather than patients, there are mannequins. And they're the worst thing ever. Hate them. Hate them, hate them, hate them. Now, as unsettling as it is by itself, it gets worse. They're alive. And there's only one thing stopping them. Light. Now, fortunately, the power is on. Is what I would say, but it's not. But luckily you have a flashlight. Now, I still hate them, and I hated playing through this part again because I wanted to get a refresher on playing this, and still hate this part. But once you escape, you meet the only living thing here, the doctor, who seems to be taking care of the patients in the hospital, but has his eye on one in particular. And after you remove their life support, the doctor goes into a frenzy, chasing you until you trap him in a furnace. And you're left with two choices: burn him alive, or the more horrifying choice, leave him to rot in his newfound prison. Now, after escaping, you run into another building with another TV, from which at this point you have interacted with several times before, and have almost a hypnotic episode with them. This time, however, a man waits for you at the door. Meet the Thin Man. Now, rather than just waiting for you, he reaches through the TV and kidnaps Six, leaving only a shadow of her behind. And once again, you're alone. But this time with the power to travel through the static, allowing you to progress forwards and escape from the residents in the city who are absorbed in the TVs, depicted with sunken faces. After passing through, you find a TV with Six pleading for help. However, the Thin Man comes after you, and after evading him, you detach a train and are slammed into its door, and must face the Thin Man again in an injured state. However, this time, you use the same powers he uses on you, and you easily overpower him, leaving you in control of the signal tower and the reality-altering powers. You finally enter the signal tower to save Six, who is now a disfigured version of herself, comforting himself with the music box that you initially found her with in the hunter's place. But in order to free her, you must fight against her and break her music box. And in doing so, the reality of the distorted world caves in around you. And as you escape, Six runs ahead, and the bridge falls behind her, leaving you to jump into her hands, as you've done time and time before. And once again, she catches you. But this time, she doesn't pull up. She hesitates and then drops you. And as she leaves, she encounters a shadow of herself, which leaves her alone and hungry. Now, we go back to Mono, who is alive, but trapped in the distorted world. And he sits and waits while time passes around him. He grows up. But as you see him grow, he starts to look similar, but not just similar, identical. You see him turn into the Thin Man. Now, funny enough, Little Nightmares 2 isn't a sequel, but rather a prequel to the original story. In chronological order, the stories start with Little Nightmares 2, where everything begins. Mono wakes in the wilderness, travels with Six, and eventually faces a signal tower. And in the end, Mono becomes the Thin Man, creating a loop in their own story. And Six takes her first steps towards the darker version of herself that we meet later. She eventually leaves Mono, now wearing the yellow raincoat, and begins her path of hunger, leading her towards her maw. Now, you have Seekers of the Maw following that, which is, while Six is waking in the maw, the runaway kid is already in action. His story runs parallel to the beginning of Little Nightmares 2, where his journey is through the depths, the hideaway, and finally into the residence, only to be transformed into a gnome, which is a critical twist in the storyline because it sets up the darkest moment in the first game and his eventual fate in Six's story. Lastly, Little Nightmares 1. This is where Six's nightmare fully begins. Captured and trapped inside the maw, she escapes from the janitor, the twin chefs, and the ravenous guests, and finally fights the lady herself. And along the way, her hunger consumes her, first with food, then bait, then with a rat, and finally with the runaway kid. At the end, she devours the lady, absorbing her powers and escaping the maw, leaving nothing but death and shadows behind her. Now, there are other stories that I haven't covered as well, such as Very Little Nightmares, being the mobile game, which is a prequel to both Little Nightmares 1 and 2. And there are some other things made, such as the podcast titled Sound of Nightmares and the Little Nightmares comics. Now, I recommend you play through at least 1 and 2. They are really good games, and if not watch them, maybe watch someone else that's played them. There's a few people that I'll recommend later on. Now, as for what's to come for Little Nightmares 3, it is planned to be released on October 10th of 2025. That's at least its Steam release, which by the time this is uploaded, it'll be released in about a week or so. And originally, it was planned to be released in 2024, but got pushed back. And unlike the original first 2 games, this game is produced by Supermassive Games, the creator of titles such as Until Dawn and The Quarry, rather than Tarsier Studios, the original developers. It'll be released on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and the Switch, both 1 and 2. Now, I personally have tried not to be spoiled by the upcoming game, so the information on the game and the storyline will be minimal. But in the game, there will be 2 protagonists, Lo and Alone. Personally, I can't wait for the game to come out. I mean, I've been waiting since I first played through the games on stream 2 years ago. However, funny enough, Little Nightmares 3 was announced 2 months before I ever played the games. And the big question I'm wondering is, with the storyline to come, will it continue on from the stories we played through before, or will it be brought into a new story altogether? And I really can't wait to find out. Now, thank you for watching through all of this, and at this point, I do only have 1 missing achievement. And yes, I don't have the Heart of the Core achievement. But I do have a total of roughly 30 hours in Little Nightmares, since I've played through the games again to record this. Now, I hope you find this helpful, and if you'd like more information, I suggest you play through the original games, or watch past playthroughs, such as Cory Kenshin, with the iconic "I'm right there" line. That is what it's from, yes. As well as Markiplier. I rewatched some of his, and his are very similar to my reactions while playing the games. Now, for a little more info on Little Nightmares 3, you can watch the trailers. There's also a demo playthrough that's roughly 40 minutes long, and all of that is on YouTube. So now watch those on your own discretion because there will be spoilers in there. Now, again, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next Little Nightmare.